really good day. It is Friday, and so we are, for the most part, at the end of the week, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, I think so. Yeah, Friday. We're at the end of the week. Let's do the news. Interestingly enough, it's news, but it's pertaining to self in this one. I'm going to start this way, though. If you guys enjoy the content, and you find yourself coming back here often, please consider supporting the content, either through PayPal, Patreon, or I guess mail at this point. We have all sorts of ways. And even if your support doesn't necessarily rise to that level, please consider liking the video and sharing the content. It's absolutely appreciated. So there's a story that I ran into as I was just kind of going through my Twitter feed that it enamored me because it made me feel at one with the rest of the country. And I know that sounds a little bit cosmic and a little bit of woo-woo, but it is to some degree true. James Baldwin at one point kind of made the point that pain is one of those things that connects you to each and every other person that has felt some level of pain. And in this case, regarding healthcare, the overwhelming majority of us are vulnerable. And I'm talking about from the standpoint of costs. They're vulnerable. When I was younger, I used to annoy my mom because I would say I was a burden. Now, she hated this interpretation. Because, I was being honest. I was honest with myself and made the point that, well, yeah, there's certain benefits that my mom get from having a kid. But those benefits go along the lines with stressing her to make her somewhat of a stronger person. But let's dwell on the point that there's stress. And at the point where the medical issue was found, that took on an entirely new dimension. I mean, it was to the point where they were about to fire her at work because they apparently didn't believe her that her kid was sick. It was all sorts of odd stuff. But also medical bills. And just because you have insurance, that's not necessarily protection, particularly if there is something significant that happens. Because your wages are going to drop at the exact same time that your bills are going to go up. When we got older, of course, because I'm here now, I'm a grown man, way past 21, and those bills, of course, transfer over to me. Recently, I had this situation where, it was a few days ago, it was somewhat of an embarrassing situation, where a medical bill apparently found me and was going to take me to court over the bill. And then the lawyer wanted half, essentially wanted nearly, let's say, $1,500. The average person in this country don't have $500 in the bank, meaning that the majority of the people in this country would have essentially been dragged to court to have to deal with this particular bill. And these are people who are on Medicare, who are on Social Security. These are just regular, ordinary Americans who ends up incurring a certain amount of debt, not because they did anything wrong, but just because their economic status didn't match up with their ability to essentially supply healthcare needs for themselves. Same thing with my wife. Well, not the exact same thing, but in her case, both of us have insurance, by the way. My wife goes to get a checkup, or not a checkup, she was having certain issues, and she goes to get those issues checked. She's having extreme pain, so when we end up, did we end up in the ER? I think we ended up in the ER. She's in extreme pain, and of course, they don't necessarily know what's wrong. The ER is trying to just make sure she's not dying. She gets to her doctor figures out what's wrong. The doctor sends her a bill for $1,500. Now, the what's wrong in this case was only what's causing the pain, but not necessarily the thing that's creating the thing that's causing the pain, if that makes sense. Like the doctor just could say, oh yeah, this is why you're in pain. But I can't tell you why, the thing started in the first place. $1,500. My wife calls him and kind of makes the point to him that, look, I would have never had this procedure if you would have told me that this is what you were looking for. She would have blew the procedure off because she knew she would have had to pay a ton of money for something that she, for the most part, didn't necessarily want to pay a ton of money for. It's overwhelmingly expensive. And what ends up happening is decisions like Am I going to get this particular medication? Ugh, man, that's kind of pricey. I'm going to let that ride. This is with insurance. Am I going to go to this doctor visit? No, I'm going to let that ride. And waiting until it gets to the point of something severe before going to the hospital. And then while at the hospital, if you find out that the thing that you thought was severe wasn't severe at all, kicking yourself for going to the hospital in the first place. This is both of us. And the wild part about this is we're not even out of the norm. This is normal behavior for Americans. I just came across a Gallup poll that was asking Americans their attitudes towards healthcare, particularly around this thing of how do they afford it and what do they do in order to have to get from point A to point B. And you find that 65 million Americans are saying the exact same thing that I'm saying, regardless of the racial demographics, gay, straight, sexual orientation, what, doesn't matter. The overwhelming 99% of us are vulnerable. And ultimately, we are in the situation where we've allowed ourselves to be atomized to where we've allowed a healthcare system to not do the one basic thing that it's supposed to do, supply healthcare. Republicans have been screaming about rationing, and look at it, we're rationing it ourselves. Let's take a look at the Gallup poll. I'm not going to keep this one long, so if, people pop in and I'm gone. Key findings. Americans express great concern about the individual and collective impact of healthcare costs. 45% of Americans are concerned a major health event will leave them bankrupt. 77% are concerned that rising healthcare costs will cause significant and lasting damage to the United States economy. You understand that going the way that we're going is entirely unsustainable. Healthcare costs are spiking. We're paying twice as much as everyone else in the world, and we're not getting better outcomes. Our outcomes tend to be worse. If you look at infant child mortality and things like that, even our aging, like the rate at which we die, our death rate is higher. Twice as much, not better outcomes. Healthcare costs lacks transparency. 47% of Americans never know what a visit to emergency room will cost before receiving care. 47%, that number should be higher than that. I never know what it's going to cost. You go in, oh my God, this is broken. Oh my God, I'm stabbed. Oh my God, something is taking place. The guy from Jackass, he says, oh my God, this thing is in my ass. I need you to get it out. How much are they going to charge you for that? Do you really ask? For the most part, you allow your insurance to cover it and you go about your way. They charge you what they charge you. If you have insurance, you just assume insurance covers it. 41% report foregoing a visit to the emergency room due to costs in the past 12 months. That's me. That's my wife. Literally, nearly half of the country says, I'm not going to go to the hospital to get something checked that I think I really need to get checked because I don't want to deal with the cost of healthcare. Is this really what we want our country to be? Honestly, think about it. Richest country on the planet. And we have a situation where the people in the country, a large segment of the people in the country, don't want to get healthcare because they're terrified that the cost is going to either leave them bankrupt or just eat them alive. And even if you, let's say, skip the emergency room visits and you're just talking about your doctor, I can tell you this from experience. Going to one doctor who then sends you to another doctor, who then sends you to another doctor because they can't figure out what's the problem, and each doctor is going to get their share of the pie in this case. No, it's not an emergency room visit, but you're nickel and dime to all these various people, and if it's a specialist, you're going to get hit that much harder. And that's assuming you have pretty decent insurance. Why is this what we want? When you look at the rest of the world, this is not the way the rest of the world functions. They look at us and think that we are insane. I know, because in each place I've had to go to the hospital and deal with the people in those countries. And I had the opportunity to discuss with them how their hospital system is arranged, how their particular system works. And they think we are utterly insane in the way that we go about it. We pay twice as much for less care. Or you could say for not better outcomes. We don't get twice as better outcomes for the twice as much we pay for healthcare. We need to do something different. Despite poor outcomes, many Americans insist on the supremacy of U.S. healthcare. This is perhaps one of the saddest questions in the batch. United States, America doesn't have a supremacy of healthcare over the world. I promise you, we were ranked 30 something in the list in regards to healthcare. 48% believe the quality of care found in the United States is either best in the world or among the best. The care may be decent, but the problem is whether people can afford it and whether people seek that care out because they can't afford it or they're going to be terrified of a bill. That's the point that we're trying to get at. We need to do something different. Americans' perception of quality diverge among partisan lines, but individual experiences and pessimism around bipartisan solutions are aligned. 67% of Republicans consider the quality of America to be the best or among the best in the world. 38% of Democrats share this sentiment. Republicans are doughy-eyed about America. They don't look at it with a clear eye in this case. I think that's more dishonest. If I'm being honest, it's one thing to say, I accept you with all of your flaws. My little dog, Pitsu, he's an asshole. But I accept him for the fact that he's an asshole. Stubborn, strong-willed, by the same token, adorable as all hell. But he's an asshole. But again, my acceptance of him accepts the fact that he's an asshole. I don't have to pretend that he's something that he's not. I'm saying that Republicans do this with aspects of America, and then they get mad at lefties when we're pointing these aspects out, saying we want to change these things. We want to change these things because they're flaws, and it's not necessarily a prized position to say that we're paying twice as much for less quality. It's just a bizarre position to take. Let's keep going. 27% of Democrats and 21% of Republicans deferred care due to costs in the past 12 months. Essentially chose not to get care, punted. More than two-thirds of Republicans and Democrats are not at all confident that the elected Republicans and Democrats will be able to achieve bipartisan legislation to reduce costs. More than two-thirds? That's all? I'm going to put that number at 99%. Americans can't afford to make good quality healthcare decisions a priority. Americans borrowed an estimated $88 billion in the past 12 months to pay for healthcare. Let me repeat that. Americans borrowed $88 billion in the past 12 months to pay for healthcare. 65 million adults had a health issue but did not seek treatment due to costs in the past 12 months. Is this what we want? Can we do better than this? The answer to that question is yes, of course we can do better than this. We need to make it, however, a priority. People have this tendency to believe that just because they're talking, moving, acting, and all these other things, and information is coming in and they're making choices, that they themselves are the sole distributor of that choice. They're not. You have cultural issues. There are things that are implicitly drilled into you just based on the way the society organizes itself. In this case, we have a society that has organized itself around the maximization of profit, around a top 1%, the rich. The rich are revered almost with this kind of religiosity, can't get it out, with this kind of religious reverence. And by the same token, the poor is kind of looked at with the same similar degree of, or you can say, but an opposite sentiment in the opposite direction. It's almost just by the momentum of the reverence that the opposite holds true. This leads to be a certain degree of stigma that's associated with poverty. It's not necessarily something people want. For obvious reasons, not having the ability to have access to the things that you need, especially in a society that goes with this idea of the individual, this prize of the individual, this pull yourself by your own bootstraps, this rugged individualism. Not being able to access to the things that you need and provide those things for yourself in a society that provides that or raises that as one of the ultimate objectives has a stigma associated with it. It's not an easy thing. Part of the reason, though, the thing that I want to point attention to is the rugged individual thing makes perfect sense if you are the top 1% and you don't want people to focus on society as a collective, as a group of individuals, as a group of human beings, not just as individuals, but also a community. You want those people to focus on themselves as individuals, as individual pursuit of profit. I got mine, screw you, and let that be the end of it. And have that to take place all throughout the country. You can control people far easier when those people are dealing with these issues in an individualistic way. And if you can get those people to believe that their difficulties are not entirely their own, meaning if you can get those people to believe that all of their problems that they're having in the society, meaning the poverty, the not being able to access the things that you need, not being able to access healthcare, making decisions on healthcare where you're saying, I'm going to punt it, even though I really need to figure out what's wrong with me. Think of the number of people that die per year for doing stuff like that. If you can get people to believe that all of those things are just them, then you can get them to exclude these ideas of a collective, the larger society. The fact that these things are not an act of God, that these are policies, laws that people put on the books that advantage some at the expense of others. Obama leaving the healthcare industry intact with this utopian idea that you can have these healthcare companies remain leeches within the system itself and provide amazing, decent care and lower the costs. Yes, he moderately lowered the costs. No, he didn't fix the issue. Healthcare costs are still spiking and people are still doing stuff like this. Trump care was going to be even that much worse, which was horrific and couldn't even come to pass. I would put to you that if the point of healthcare is healthcare, then let's let it be the point. Let's do it right. We are not just individuals floating in a society, and this society is not neutral. Society does things that advantage some and disadvantage others. I suggest to you that we focus on this from the standpoint of a collective, of a group of us. All of us are vulnerable in this case. I suggest that we don't look at this from the perspective of a top 1% that don't want you to focus on yourself as a collective, that don't want you to focus on this from a legal sense, meaning putting laws in the books that advantage you from the standpoint of healthcare, that lower the cost of healthcare, that lower the cost of those prescriptions. Those things are doable. They just have to be done. A better world is indeed possible, and we can look at ourselves as a united front in this particular issue. The change, this, I would consider this to be somewhat of a travesty. This is not happening to one or two people. This is happening to millions of other human beings just like you, putting to difficulty, again, for no fault of their own, but purely because of the situation to which they find themselves. This person has cancer. This person has kidney failure. This person has AIDS. This person is some kind of genetic degenerative disease, that requires some sort of treatment. It makes it difficult to work in other situations. We can do better than this. We can do better than this. That's my point. This is the richest country on the planet. There is no reason why that should be the case. And one last point, because this video has gone too long, but the rugged individualist stuff is nonsense. Part of the reason that a capitalist country would look at themselves as rugged individualists is because you as a collective make decisions on taxes, you make decisions on environmental policies, and you make decisions on healthcare laws and regulations. And you can make decisions to say that we're going to lower the price of healthcare. There's no reason why we're going to pay twice as much as everywhere else in the rest of the world. We can lower the price of prescription drugs. There's nowhere else reason we should be paying twice as much or in some ungodly amount than the rest of the world. We can choose to tackle this problem as a society itself, recognizing that all of us are vulnerable and recognizing that capitalism doesn't necessarily need to instigate itself into each and every corner of our society. Again, that's somewhat of a utopian idea that it can and that it should. There are some areas where we need to tend to our own. In this case, healthcare is one of those areas. If the goal is to lower healthcare costs, if the goal is to provide healthcare for each and every person in this country, we can do that. We can't, however, do that with leeches within the system itself. Getting rid of costs at the point of sale, meaning when you go to get a procedure, you get a procedure. When you go to get a surgery, you get a surgery. There's nobody hounding you in order to get your wallet, your check, your insurance company. None of that stuff. You're born in this country, it's your birthright. Congratulations. You get health care. We're an evolved society. And in this evolved society, we've decided that each and every person deserves health care as a human right. Not just as a human right. It cuts down the cost of other things. Like, think of the people who die because they can't necessarily afford health care. Think of the people who get sicker because they don't want to necessarily go to get health care for what may be something that's minor, but later on becomes something more significant. My point is simple. We can do better than this. We should do better than this. And in this case, it's a better option. I understand that people may feel squeamish about this, but if you want to look at it in any way, look at it as your insurance card changes. The services that are provided under that maxed out, meaning you get all of the services that anybody else would get in any particular plan, any Cadillac plan. You're covered. Cosmetic surgeries, probably not. But for the most part, the procedures that you may need when you go and get some kind of procedure or you get something done, you are covered. Your taxes may go up a little bit, but the amount that your taxes go up outweighs the amount that you would be paying in normal circumstances for healthcare, meaning you benefit. The majority of the society benefits. And the 20 million people that don't have healthcare now, meaning Obama went through 8 years of that nonsense of dealing with Republicans with healthcare. And after that major lift, still 20 million people still are left without healthcare. We can do better than this. We can do better than this. I'm not going to keep this much longer. I didn't want this one to go too long, and 21 minutes is way, way too long for this particular point. I'm trying to drill this home because I understand that people have their qualms about Medicare for all in some cases. And I understand that it is even a major lift in order to try to get something like this passed. But it will be well worth it. Just saying. Thanks all. I'll be back momentarily. Bye-bye.